Thanks a lot, guys. Outside the Sage locker room, we are pleased to be joined by linebacker Scott Fujita. First of all, what a boring game. Kind of uneventful out there, huh?
Right. Yeah, my guts have never felt like they did tonight. I mean, that was incredible. Roller coaster of a game, so many turning points. But to come up with the win, it's pretty indescribable right now.
Biologically, Scott Fujita is not Japanese. He is a dirty blonde, green-eyed American born to Caucasian parents in California. On the surface, the only thing Japanese about him is his name, but the average person can't see what Scott has on the inside. Scott was given up by his birth mother at 6 weeks old, and consequently adopted by Helen and Rod Fujita. While Helen is white, Rod is a third-generation Japanese-American born inside a Japanese internment camp during World War II. Growing up, Scott and his biological older brother Jason, whom the Fujitas also adopted, received weird looks from strangers while out in public with their parents. This was a common issue for Scott. No one believed that this half-Japanese family came with these fully Caucasian children.
And I can even say, growing up and going to school, there were a lot of times a substitute teacher would come in, and I actually had to present a photo ID to prove that my last name was actually Fujita.
There is a Japanese saying, "Shikata ga nai," Rod Fujita says. There is nothing you can do about it, so live your life. Every January 1st, the family celebrated Shogatsu, the Japanese New Year. On May 5th, Rod would raise a koi flag on a bamboo pole in their backyard for Kodomo no Hi, Japanese Children's Day. With every meal, Scott ate white rice with chopsticks. The first time I had a baked potato, I was 8 years old at a friend's house, Scott said. Most white kids growing up have a baked potato every day. I didn't even know what to do with it, how to open it. I was the only white kid in high school eating octopus. However, Scott's real knowledge of Japanese culture came from his grandparents. His grandfather, Nagao, told Scott and Jason stories of Japanese art and history, of the samurai warriors of days past, of Mount Fuji. When you've never met a single blood relative in your life, Scott says, the idea of ethnicity and blood relations takes on a different meaning. I found a very beautiful and interesting culture filled with dignity, respect and honor, and it became mine. At an early age, it was apparent that race mattered none to Fujita. His grandmother Lily recalls him introducing himself to strangers with, "Hi, I'm Scott, I'm 4, and I'm Japanese." To Scott, race and skin color played no part in his identity. In embracing the Japanese culture as his own, he rebelled against the preconceived notions others held about him. He believed that what defined him as a person was himself. Says Lily, that's the connection point for Scott. You choose to be what you are. It's not your location, your obstacles, or your skin. You choose. He learned that from his family. What he also learned from his family was a place of Japanese-American history, devastating in nature but often ignored by white society. In 1941, Lily and Nagao were students at Ventura, California Junior College when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. 2 months later, President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, ordering over 120,000 Americans of Japanese descent to one of 10 internment camps. To avoid separation, they quickly married and were shipped with their families to an army barracks in Gila River, Arizona. Despite the immoral imprisonment, Nagao enlisted to fight for the country that discriminated against him. During World War II, he fought in Italy as part of the all-Japanese 442nd Regimental Combat Team, one of the most revered units of the war. Back at the camp, Lily gave birth to their son, Rod. After the war, Nagao and Lily moved back to Southern California, where Nagao became one of the first bilingual attorneys. In 1988, a year after Nagao's death, Lily received a handwritten apology from then-President George H.W. Bush, as well as a reparations check worth $20,000. For Scott, the detention of his grandparents causes anger and resentment. However, he rebels against the ignorance and lack of knowledge on the subject through thoroughly researching the circumstances surrounding the camps. It's a horrible chapter in our history, and it bothers me that, like most people, I wasn't even taught about it in school, Scott says. I look at my grandparents and what they dealt with in the Japanese internment in Arizona. That sense of perseverance, of making the best out of a bad situation, has always been something I drew inspiration from. I always ask myself, what in the world do I have to complain about? It is through football that Scott honors the perseverance of his grandparents. But football was never a sure thing for Scott. As a high school freshman, he stood at an unassuming 5'6". By senior year, Scott had sprouted to 6'4" and became a star for Rio Mesa High in Oxnard, California, but he remained too thin to draw attention from top college programs. However, Scott never let others' expectations define what he would be. It didn't matter to him that only one player of Japanese descent had ever played in the NFL, or that very few Asian Americans play this sport at the high school or college levels.
Yeah, so when I played football in high school, I was the only Asian on the team, and now that I'm an athletic trainer on the football team here at Northwestern, there are absolutely none. So I don't think we really participate in the sport.
Scott walked on to the football team at the University of California, Berkeley, where he redshirted his freshman season to add bulk to his small frame. As a sophomore, he dealt with nerve stingers in his neck, and during his junior season, he had career-threatening neck surgery that placed him in the intensive care unit for 3 days. He went on to be an All-Pac-10 conference linebacker his junior and senior years, and in the 2002 NFL Draft, the Kansas City Chiefs selected Scott in the 5th round. A year later, his teammates named him the Chiefs' best rookie, and in his second and third seasons, he led the team in tackles. In 2005, when Scott was traded to the Dallas Cowboys, he received the chance to line up alongside fellow linebacker Dat Nguyen, the first Vietnamese player in the NFL. After the trade, Dat Nguyen was like, "Oh man, we got Fujita coming in," Scott recalls. But we had never met in person, so he comes into the training room to meet me and says, "Where's Fujita? No, that can't be Fujita." For a second, I saw disappointment in his eyes. After his season in Dallas, Scott had multiple teams fighting for his services, but it was in a Katrina-ravaged New Orleans that he found his best fit. The hurricane, my family's internment, issues of race, I feel like all of that is a part of me when I play, he says. 3 years later, Scott found himself playing in the Super Bowl for the city of New Orleans for something bigger than himself. But for Scott, this was nothing new. He had been playing for his grandparents for years, rebelling against the common idea of what race is, and battling stereotypes to prove his identity, the identity that he defined for himself. "I swear I'm not delusional," Scott says. "I know I don't have a drop of Japanese blood in me. But what is race? It's just a label. The way you're raised, your family, the people you love, that means more than anything else."